Brothers and sisters in Islam, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was a person of kindness. He was a person that would bring joy to the people around him. He was a person that was light-hearted and he would smile often. How true are the words of Allah Ta'ala in which He says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have not sent you except you are a mercy to the world. He was not sent to burden us. He was not sent to create havoc or rancor. He was not sent to corrupt or oppress or disunite and divide. But our Prophet ﷺ was sent as a mercy from Arham al-Rahimin, from the most merciful. Sent as a rahmah from Arham al-Rahimin. He was sent as a mercy from the most merciful. Alayhi afdalu salati wa atammu taslim. Some of the tabi'een are people who did not get to meet the Prophet ﷺ, but they got to meet the Sahaba. Some of the tabi'een, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim, they asked Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, ما كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصنع في بيته إذا كان عندك. They're curious to know. They said, what did the Prophet ﷺ do when he was at home? When doors were shut and doors were closed and he's at home with his family and he's relaxing. How was the Prophet ﷺ? A question that all of us are eager to know. The more we hear about this man, ﷺ, the more we want to know. The more we learn about him, the more we want to know about his character and his inner beauty. ﷺ. Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she responds to the tabi'een and she says, كَانَ أَلْيَنُ النَّاسِ. He was the softest of people. She says, وَأَكْرَمُ النَّاسِ, and the most generous of people. And then she goes on to say, وَكَانَ رَجُلًا مِنْ رِجَالِكُمْ إِلَّا أَنَّهُ كَانَ ضَحَّاكًا بَسَّامًا. He was a man from among you men, except that he was excessive when it comes to his laughter and when it comes to him smiling. Simak bin Harb was also a tabi'i. On a separate occasion, Simak bin Harb, look at all these tabi'in, they want to get to know our Prophet ﷺ. They didn't have the opportunity to meet him. And so when they meet the Sahaba, they want to know, just like we would if a Sahabi came here, we'd like to know, what was this man like? Alayhi salatu wassalam. And so Simak bin Harb, on another occasion, he's another tabi'i. He asks one of the ashab of our Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam by the name of Jabir ibn Samara radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. أقبل على جابر يريد أن يشبع أشواقه فيسأله أكنت تجالس النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Simak bin Harb, he asks Jabir, he says with so much passion and desire to know, he says, did you used to sit with our Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam? Did you used to accompany our Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam? And subhanAllah, think about his mind. His mind is racing, thinking about how beautiful that experience would be with our beloved Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And Jabir radiallahu anhu, he responds excitedly. Of course, because he knows the privilege that he had and the honor that he had to be in the company of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And so he says, Na'am kathiran. Yes, of course, I used to sit with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam a lot. All the time I used to sit. And out of all the things that Jabir ibn Samura radiallahu anhu can recall about our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the first thing that pops up into his mind is the fact that our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam would smile. He says to Simak, the tabi'i, he says, كان لا يقوم من مصلاه من مصلاه الذي يصلي فيه الصبح حتى تطلع الشمس. The Prophet ﷺ would not get up from the place that he prayed Salat al-Fajr until sunrise. فإذا طلعت قام. Once the sun rose, then he would get up. وكانوا يتحدثون فيأخذون في أمر الجاهلية. And the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum around the Prophet ﷺ, this time between after praying Salat al-Fajr until the sun rose, the Sahaba would begin engaging in chit-chat and conversations about how life was back in Jahiliyyah, the silly things that they used to do, and the memories that they have. فَيَضْحَكُونَ وَيَتَبَسَّمُ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. And they would laugh about it. And as Jabir radiallahu anhu recalls, that our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam would accompany them, sitting there with them, smiling. Alayhi salatu wasalam. And subhanAllah, he wouldn't say, do you know who I am? I am the Prophet of Allah. Don't you know I am the greatest creation of Allah Ta'ala? How dare you talk about Amr Jahiliyyah, matters of Jahiliyyah in my company, laugh and joke around in my company. But that's not who our Prophet ﷺ was. Perhaps some people, when you sit with them, you feel that discomfort, but not our Prophet. To everybody that used to accompany him, they would feel a sense of comfort. No, he'd be smiling with them. He'd be with them right there. He was so down to earth. This is who he was, alayhi salatu wassalam. And you find this description of our Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam narrated across ashab, across the Sahaba. You know, you might think, okay, perhaps Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha is saying that the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, bassam and dhahaka, he'd be excessive in his smiling and his laughter because the Prophet loved her so much. Or maybe if Abu Bakr and Umar narrated this, we know how much the Prophet loved Abu Bakr and Umar. So of course, whenever he's in the company of Abu Bakr and Umar, he'd be smiling. But that's not the case. The Prophet ﷺ, his natural disposition, that's who he was. He would just always smile. And he'd love to smile. عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. Jarir ibn Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, from the time that I accepted Islam. Listen to what he says. He says, from the time that I accepted Islam, the Prophet ﷺ has never looked at my face except that he was smiling. He says, ما رآني رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم منذ أسلمت إلا تبسم وجهي. Another Sahabi by the name of Abdullah ibn al-Harith رضي الله تعالى عنه. He says, ما رأيت أحدا أكثر تبسما من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I have never met a person, there is not a person that I have seen that smiles more than our Prophet ﷺ. Like any individual, imagine how many people this person has met and got to know and greeted, hundreds across a lifespan, right? And even thousands that he's seen, maybe from a distance, or just maybe not got to know, but just seen from a distance. And the conclusion that he makes, out of all of these people that he has got to know, that he has seen, that he has spoke with, the conclusion that he arrives to is that the person that smiles the most is Nabiyur Rahmah, is Muhammad bin Abdullah alayhi salatu wassalam. Wallah, you cannot help but to hear of this man and love him. You cannot help but to be eager to meet him the more you learn about him. Forget about who he was as a prophet. Forget about who he was as a leader. Forget about who he was as a commander. But just who he was as a human being. عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. And subhanAllah, you don't even have to greet him to know that this man is something special. عليه الصلاة والسلام. You don't even have to greet him and get to know him and be personal with him to know that this man is exceptional and he is special. But just looking at his face, his blessed face, alayhi salatu wassalam, you can tell that this person is exceptional. Abdullah bin Salam, radiallahu anhu, before he converted to Islam, Abdullah bin Salam was from the ulama of the Yahud. He was from the scholars of the Jewish tribes, of the Jews of Medina. And Abdullah bin Salam, radiallahu anhu, of course knew that prophets have certain signs. And so he goes to do fact check to see who this man is, if he is truly a prophet of Allah Ta'ala or not. You know how Islam initially entered into his heart? He says, عَرَفْتُ أَنَّ وَجْهَهُ لَيْسَ بِوَجْهِ كَذَّابٍ. I knew from his face that this man is not a liar. Allahumma zidna hubbahu ya Allah. Oh Allah Ta'ala, increase us in his love. Bless us with the honor of meeting him. Bless us ya Allah Ta'ala with his shafa'ah and his intercession, and bless us ya Rabbana Ta'ala to be in his company on Yawm al-Qiyamah and in Jannah as well. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم واستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. استغفر الله العظيم الذي لا إله إلا هو إليه. استغفر الله العظيم الذي لا إله إلا هو إليه. استغفر الله العظيم الذي لا إله إلا هو إليه. الحمد لله على إحسانه والشكر له على توفيقه وامتنانه وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له تعظيما لشأنه وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الداعي إلى رضوانه صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. يقول الله عز وجل يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. We praise Allah Ta'ala, and I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah Ta'ala, and Muhammad is his final messenger, alayhi salatu wassalam. Allah Azza wa Jal, he says in the Quran, O you who believe, ittaqullah, fear Allah, وَلْتَنظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. And look at what you are presenting for Allah Ta'ala tomorrow, meaning Yawm al-Qiyamah. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ, fear Allah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. Brothers and sisters in Islam, from time to time in the second khutbah, I mention things that we can incorporate into our lives. I try and mention things from time to time, things that we can directly incorporate into our lives. And today is the most simplest of them, and that is simply to smile to the people around us. To the people we're close with, to the people we're not so close with, but have a habit to smile consistently. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, أَحَبُّ النَّاسِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. The most beloved people to Allah Ta'ala are the people that are the most beneficial to the people around them. The Prophet ﷺ, in this particular hadith, he goes on to mention actions that are extremely beloved to Allah Ta'ala, and at the same time, they're also beneficial to people. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions feeding an individual. Another riwayah says feeding an individual that is hungry. Another thing that the Prophet ﷺ mentions in the narration is to pay off a person's debt. And one of the things, and this is what I want to point you towards, the Prophet ﷺ, one of the things that he mentions in this hadith, he says, وَأَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ سُرُورٌ يُدْخِلُهُ عَلَى مُسْلِمٍ. And one of the most beloved actions to Allah Ta'ala are when you make people joyful and you make people happy. Do you know how much happiness and joy you can bring an individual by simply joking and laughing with people? You know how much joy you can bring them? Sometimes, what people need, and this happens very often, especially elderly within our family, the elderly within our community, just need an excuse to forget about their problems, forget about their loneliness, forget about their depression. You know how much happiness and joy you can bring these individuals by simply laughing and joking and being in their company. Allahu Akbar. And that's all it takes, and it's free. It costs nothing for us to do so. And likewise your children as well, and your spouses as well. Don't come home frowning all the time, unhappy, disgruntled. Don't come home. Find an excuse to be happy and smile. And wallahi, there's so many excuses that we can find. Don't tell yourself my problems are too big. My problems are too severe. Wallahi, just recently I was watching in one of the videos of a woman in Gaza. Wallahi, sometimes when I think of these women, I think of these people in Gaza, men, women, children, I think, what is the difference going to be between me and them on Yawm al-Qiyamah? This woman in Gaza, she lost her final child, her fourth child, and she's smiling ear to ear. Wallahi, she's smiling ear to ear after she lost 3 other children before this incident. And she says, all of my children are gone. And she's smiling ear to ear. And she says, أفتخر بأن أبنائي شهداء. I am proud that all of my children are shuhada. All of them are martyrs. If she has an excuse to smile, don't we have an excuse to smile? Don't we have an excuse to smile? Don't say your problems are too severe and they're too big. Even our Prophet ﷺ, when he was weak, the day that he died, he was smiling. ﷺ. He found an excuse. He found an excuse to smile, though he was weak. Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he narrates that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, because our Prophet ﷺ was so weak to exit and lead the ummah in prayer, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, radiallahu an Abi Bakr, he goes up to lead the ummah in congregation, Salat al-Fajr. Anas radiallahu anhu, he says, فَنَظَرَ إِلَيْهِمْ وَهُمْ فِي صُفُوفٍ. The Prophet ﷺ, he opens up the curtain to see what is the hala, what is the situation of the ummah. And he sees his ummah lining up to pray. فَتَبَسَّمْ. The Prophet ﷺ, he smiles. This is despite him being extremely ill, weak, in pain, having a high fever. But he still found an excuse to smile. Salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. I end with one of my favorite incidents that Ahlul Siyar mention. And that is after the conquest of Mecca, there was an individual by the name of Fadalat ibn Umair. He was a munafiq. Fadalat ibn Umair, when the conquest of Mecca took place, he was a munafiq. And he set out to kill the Prophet ﷺ. He looks at the situation of Mecca, the center of idolatry and our heritage and our traditions. And now Mecca is upon the religion of this man Muhammad bin Abdullah ﷺ. And he sets out to kill him. I'm going to finish this man. The Prophet ﷺ was doing tawaf around the Kaaba. And so Fadalat ibn Umair, he pretends like he's doing worship so he can gain closeness to him. He gets closer and closer to him in proximity, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he gets so close that he's able to take out his dagger and kill the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. But just before he's able to do anything, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Afadala? Is that Fadala here?" And startled, Fadala, he says, "Na'am, Fadala ya Rasulullah." Yes, it's Fadala, O Prophet of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says to him, "ماذا كنت تحدث به نفسك?" What thoughts were occupying your mind? What were you thinking about? What were you doing? He says, لا شيء كنت أذكر الله. I was just simply doing the dhikr of Allah Ta'ala, that's all I was doing. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ knows that this man is coming to kill me. فضحك النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم قال استغفر الله. And the Prophet ﷺ laughs in the face of the one that is coming to murder him. فضحك النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, and he laughs and he says to him, استغفر الله. Seek the forgiveness of Allah Ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ, he puts his hand on the chest of Fadalat ibn Umair. And he says, والله ما رفع يده عن صدري حتى ما من خلق الله شيء أحب إلي منه. Fadalat ibn Umair, he says that when the Prophet ﷺ put his hand on my chest, by Allah, before he even lifted his hand from my chest, he became the most beloved of Allah Ta'ala's creation to me. This is who our Prophet ﷺ was, with kindness in the face of the one that is coming to murder him, smiling, laughing, kindness. This is who he was. Find an excuse to smile. Find an excuse to smile and laugh and joke. Your children, subhanAllah, some people years go by, they never even smile at their children. They never even joke with their children. Years go by, they don't smile at their spouses. Years go by and they forget about their parents who are by themselves at home. Think about the elderly in the community as well. Smile, joke, be in the company. This is the way of the Prophet ﷺ. This is the way of Nabiyur Rahmah. And this should be the way of the Ummah of Nabiyur Rahmah. We ask Allah Ta'ala for tawfiq. لبيك اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. لبيك اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. لبيك اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.